We're going to talk this morning about the wisdom from above, the wisdom that comes from God. There are two sources of wisdom in life. We need to understand that very carefully. There are two sources of wisdom in life. There's the wisdom that's from above, and there's the wisdom that's from below. And the two are so different, and they have completely different results in our lives. We're going to see that this morning as we look through James chapter 3. Are you seeking the wisdom of God in your life? Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 11 says this, "For wisdom is better than jewels, and all desirable things cannot compare with her." Proverbs 8 and verse 35, "He who finds me," in other words, who finds wisdom, finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. Wisdom from God will bless your life. When people pursue the wisdom that is from God, they'll find immense blessings and peace and harmony. They'll find life from the Lord. But on the other hand, if we pursue and let the wisdom of this world dominate our lives and our thinking and our attitudes, we're going to find selfishness. We're going to find strife. We're going to find relationships that are broken. And we're going to find every kind of evil if what we're feeding off of is the wisdom that comes from below. And so we're going to look at these two types of wisdom this morning and see their characteristics and ask the question, which one are you operating off of in your life? So look at verse 13 with me, James 3:13. "Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds done in the gentleness of wisdom." You want to know who's wise in this world? Wisdom is shown in your behavior. You know, a lot of times we think that the person who is wise is the person who is wise in a worldly sense, but a lot of times people that are wise and that the world looks to as being wise, they are arrogant, they are aggressive, they are haughty and just lifted up in their own minds, they're pushy. That's not the wisdom of God. Notice verse 13, what he says. "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good behavior." Wisdom is about our behavior. It is shown in the way that we live our lives. Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. Wisdom is about our behavior, our conduct. Wisdom from above is about gentleness. You may have the word meekness in your translation there in verse 13. You may have humility in your translation. The wisdom from God, the wisdom from above, is gentle. It's humble. This is a very interesting word. It's kind of hard to fully grasp what this word means. It takes several words in English to sort of explain this word, meekness, gentleness. It's having a strength, but having a gentleness about you. It's having a poise. It's having a poise that comes from the Lord and your relationship with the Lord. It's having this attitude that because of my poise in the Lord, because of how He has treated me, because of what He has done for me, I don't have to assert myself in situations. I don't have to try to manipulate things. I don't have to be occupied with myself. I don't have to be striving and conniving and manipulating situations and people, because the Lord has been good to me. And it gives me this strength. And so I can turn then and be gentle and patient and kind with other people because of how the Lord has been with me. This kind of gentleness or humility or meekness, it's the idea that God has this. God has my back. And so therefore, I'll let Him defend me. I'll let Him fight my battles. I'll let Him protect me. I'll let Him look out after my needs. And I can then be gentle and humble and patient with everyone around me because God has my back. God is in control. That's the kind of gentleness or meekness. So see, it's a very strong thing. It's very strong, and yet it's gentle. Because I know that the Lord is in control. But he says in verse 14, "But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth." He mentions two things in verse 14, bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. He says, don't you say that you're wise if your life is characterized by jealousy and selfishness. That's not coming from God. That's not the wisdom that comes from God. These are actually the opposite of what we just saw in 13. These are the opposite characteristics of gentleness or humility or meekness. I mean, jealousy is that's the intense negative feelings that you have when someone else is successful, when someone else has an achievement. Oh, I should have gotten that job, not them. I'm better at it than they are. I've been here longer than they have. And you get this jealousy about you, and a bitter jealousy. Why should they have that car or that home or whatever it may be? Why do they get to have so many, I was thinking of a modern application, why do they get so many likes and comments on their social media? Now, I have a lot of things to say. See, it's just jealousy, intense negative feelings over another's achievements. If you have that in your heart, he says, don't you lie against the truth. You are not walking in the wisdom of God, not from the wisdom that's from above. And to have bitter jealousy is you're stewing over it. You can't let it go. You have this harsh attitude, this bad attitude about your feelings toward this person because they've achieved something, they've accomplished something, and it just burns you up. That's the wisdom of the world. That's not the wisdom of God. He says you also, if you have selfish ambition in verse 14, selfish ambition in your heart. The wisdom of the world says this, put yourself first. Look out for yourself. Make sure you get everything that's coming to you. That's the wisdom from the world, and he says that is not coming from God. Selfishness, selfish ambition, some versions say strife, and you can see how these are related. Having strife and fighting and arguing with one another, that is not coming from God. That's not where the wisdom of God will lead us. And so he says in verse 15, this wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, and demonic. What is the source of earthly wisdom, the wisdom that's from above, or from below, rather? First of all, he says that kind of wisdom is earthly. It's natural. It's demonic. Earthly. The wisdom of this world, it's from the world, and it's about the ways of this world and how the world thinks. It's natural. It's based on your own flesh. It's based upon your own desires. It's based upon your own sort of animal instincts. It's natural. It's not from God. And maybe the most stunning thing here is that the wisdom from this world is demonic. A lot of times we ask the question, do demons possess people today? And that's an interesting question, but that's really not the most pertinent question that we should be asking. We should be asking, are there demonic influences that are influencing my thinking and the way that I treat people? Because we better believe that there are demonic influences out there, and this is what's behind the wisdom of the world. It's demonic. We've got to be very careful that we don't engage in this kind of wisdom, that we don't follow this kind of wisdom. Look at verse 16. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. We need to take this verse to heart. Have you ever asked yourself, why sometimes can families not get along and be at peace with one another? Why sometimes can churches not get along? The members can't get along, they can't be at peace with one another. In any situation where you see disorder, this is like confusion, it's tumult, it's uprisings, it's this fighting and all this confusion that comes from that. Where does that come from? It's not coming from God. This is demonic. This is natural. This is earthly. This is the wisdom that is from below. And any time you see families that can't get along, I mean, as a rule, we all have our moments, right? As a rule, families can't get along. As a rule, the church can't get along with each other and be at peace with each other. Do you know what the cause of that is? It's drawing off of the wisdom of the world. It's drawing off of the wisdom from below. And I think that's so fascinating in 16. You can see the source of it. You can see the cause of it right before our eyes. What wisdom are you drawing from? That which is from above or that which is from below? You know, the wisdom of God would never lead us into evil and disorder. Every evil thing comes from the wisdom of the world. God would never lead us into that. And so there should be alarm bells flashing in our minds. Something is wrong, and I'm drawing from the wrong source. That should be our conclusion as we look at our own lives. But what about the wisdom of God? Look at verse 17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. What does the wisdom from above produce? He says, first of all, the wisdom from above is pure. In other words, it's not stained by sin. It's not something that is unholy. The wisdom of God will always lead us into what is holy and right and good. You ever heard somebody say something like this? You know, I think God just wants me to be happy. And so therefore I'm going to take this course of action in my life. And you say to the person, that is not from God. God does not, that is a sin in God's eyes. You don't want to go that direction. Yeah, but I just feel like God wants me to be happy. No, God will never lead us. His wisdom will never lead us into something that is sinful or impure or unholy. And we have to think about that, and we have to ask ourselves, wait a minute, what source am I drawing from? What source of wisdom? Where is this coming from? The wisdom of God is pure. It never leads into sin. Look at verse 17 again. The second word he has is that the wisdom of God, the wisdom from above, is peace-loving. When there's a lack of peace, you can bet on it that we're drawing from the wisdom of the world. The wisdom from above is peace-loving. It's created by people who love peace. And yet sometimes we say in our minds and in our hearts, somebody hurt me and they did me wrong, and I want to stay mad at them. You ever had that thought in your mind? I want to stay mad. I want to punish them. I want to turn my shoulder to them and give them the cold shoulder because they've hurt me, and I want to stay angry at them. That's not peace-loving. That kind of attitude, he's just told us, that is demonic. You are drawing from a demonic source when that is your attitude in your heart and my heart. I want to stay angry. I don't want to make peace. You know, you have an argument with your spouse, and that happens. And you say, well, I'm so upset about this, I'm not going to speak to him. I'm going to just punish him for a little while, for a couple hours anyway. That's not peace-loving. That's not the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God would never lead you into that kind of thinking. The wisdom of God, he says, is pure and peaceable and gentle. This is a different Greek word than what we saw earlier in verse 13. It's not insisting on my rights. It's not following the letter of the law. You know, cut people some slack. Be kind and be tolerant, and don't insist on punishing people when they do what's wrong. This is gentleness. And it's not insisting on my rights. Well, I was hurt and I demand this and I demand that. That's not the wisdom of God. Be gentle. The wisdom of God is pure and then peaceable and gentle and reasonable. Reasonable. I like the alternate translation, willing to yield. Willing to yield. I'm not insisting on my way. I'm complying with others. People are able to get along with me. You know, some people are so hard to get along with. Some people are hard, they just don't want to be reasonable. And when you talk to them, and you want to talk to them maybe about their soul, and they're not reasonable, and they don't want to hear it, and they shut you out, that's not coming from God. They can't be talked to about anything, or they'll be mad. You know, that's unreasonable. But the wisdom from God says, I'm willing to yield, I'm willing to get along, I'm willing to give up even what I want, and give up my opinions for the sake of the whole and for the sake of another. That's what the wisdom of God will lead you to. The wisdom of God, he says, is full of mercy. It's reasonable and it's full of mercy and good fruits. Full of mercy. The wisdom of God leads you into having compassion for others and pity for others, especially when they mess up. Right? How would the wisdom of God lead us when our children make mistakes? Well, that needs to be corrected. There needs to be discipline, of course, but there also needs to be mercy. Where would the wisdom of God lead us with our spouse if they make a mistake? It would lead us to mercy. Where would it lead us with our brothers and sisters in Christ when they make a mistake, when they do something that's wrong? The wisdom of God would lead us to mercy. Have pity and compassion on that person. Don't hold this anger in your heart and this bitterness. Don't be trying to punish one another. Don't be arguing and fighting. That's not where the Lord will lead us. The wisdom from above, the final thing he says, is full of good fruits. Sorry, that's not the final thing that he says, but it's full of good fruits. Wisdom is shown in your behavior. Wisdom is shown in the way that you live your life. The wisdom from above, he says, is unwavering. This is an interesting word, too. It's hard to nail down exactly what it's referring to. Some have the word impartial. Some you will have unwavering or something of that nature. The wisdom of God is impartial. It's not divisive. It doesn't speak against a brother. It doesn't judge a brother or a sister. And sometimes congregations can get into this mode, and I'm so glad that I'm not aware of this here, where we're always judging each other and speaking against each other and fighting with one another. That's not the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God, it could mean here that it's unwavering. And in other words, yes, I'm willing to yield, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to get along, but the wisdom of God says there are some things that I cannot move off of. And I'm going to be unwavering about those things. And so I could see it either way here in this passage. The wisdom of God is impartial. It doesn't show favoritism. The wisdom of God is yielding to others, and yet there are things that it won't yield on. There are things that we must stand on. That's the wisdom of God. And the wisdom of God, finally, is without hypocrisy. Without hypocrisy. There's no pretense. I'm just going to be genuine. And yeah, I've made a mistake, and I'm just going to own up to it. I'm not trying to pretend to be somebody I'm not. That's where the wisdom of God would lead. These are my faults. This is who I am, and I'm not going to be fake about it. I'm not going to put on a mask. I'm going to be without hypocrisy, without pretense. Well, look at verse 18, and we'll close. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. The seed whose fruit is righteousness, the righteous fruit that is produced by wisdom. I want you to picture, as I have here, a beautiful tree with beautiful fruit on it. And that beautiful fruit is the righteousness of God. And where does that beautiful fruit come from? It comes from people who operate on the wisdom from above. It comes from people who will plant the seeds of wisdom, and they'll plant the seeds of wisdom in peace. And this beautiful plant grows. It's the plant of righteousness and peace and brothers and sisters getting along and families getting along. I want you to picture this tree as your family. you want your family to be at peace and to get along and to love one another? Where does that come from? We've got to be planting the seeds of God's wisdom. We've got to be planting those seeds in peace. We've got to be striving to make peace. And over the years, you know what you'll find? This beautiful tree grows up, and the fruit of it is righteousness. All the things that we just saw in verse 17. These are the things that are going to be produced in your life if you will walk according to the wisdom of God. Are you seeking the wisdom of God in your life? If the wisdom from above is what you're seeking and what you are after in life, it'll be shown in your behavior. It'll be shown in your gentleness. It'll be shown in meekness. It'll be shown in your peacefulness. You see, wisdom is not as people think, that it's somebody with a advanced degree, it's somebody with high IQ, it's somebody with a lot of education. Those people can be wise in the eyes of God, certainly, but that's not required. The wisdom of God is for everyone. Whether you are educated or not educated, whatever your background may be, it doesn't matter. The wisdom of God is shown in your behavior. Are you gentle? Are you peaceful? Are you merciful? And as we plant these things in our lives, we'll be blessed. Our families will be blessed. The church will be blessed. So let us, brethren, start operating off of the wisdom of God. Because to operate off of the wisdom of the world leads to every kind of evil, all kinds of disruption, all kinds of tumult, all kinds of confusion. But to operate off of the wisdom of God, we will reap a harvest of righteousness and peace. Hope you're encouraged by those words, and if you're here this morning and would like the prayers of the congregation, we would ask you to let that be made known. And if you need to respond to the invitation of Jesus, if you believe in Him, that He's the Son of God, and you would confess that He's the Son of God, that you would be willing to turn from your sins and put Him on in baptism, we would love to help you with that this morning. If there's any need at all, would you come while we stand and sing?